So now let's talk about the tool icons. And the tool icons are located right up here. And you can see there's a lot of tools here. And we're not going to talk about all of them, but we'll talk about a few of them. The first one is home. And if for whatever reason you need to load up a new project or open a project, you could click that button and it's going to pull up your most recent project files here. I rarely use that one. The one you're going to use all the time is the selection tool, right? And that's our little arrow here. You can see that V also pulls up the selection tool, which is a shortcut I use all the time. So if I drag this down here with my selection tool, I can click and I can drag inside my composition window. I can select things here. I can import footage by double clicking and bringing in the footage. I can then use my selection tool, bring this down to my timeline and drag it down. Selection tool again, I can rearrange layers like that. What else can it do? It can move things inside here by selecting the right layer. And the selection tool just allows you to move things. It allows you to, have full control over your timeline and your composition. Next, we've got the hand. That's if we need to move around within the composition. If we have things way off the composition window over here, like maybe, another layer or a light or something like that, we can move around with the hand very easily. The shortcut for the hand is H. And like I said, it's V for the selection tool. So if I'm over here and I hit V, I'm right back on my selection tool. I can hit H and right back here, right? So if I'm like that, with the selection tool, I can't move down here, but with the hand tool, I can. Next, we've got the magnifying glass, the zoom tool, which is Z. And if I need to really zoom in on something, there we go, right? Just like that. If I hold down the Option or Alt key, I can zoom right back out, just like that. I also have a rotation tool, which is W. So if I have this layer selected, and you can see it's selected because these dots show up on the corners of the layer, and the layer is also selected here. I can take the rotation tool and I can just click and I can rotate just like that. I can also hold down Shift, right? And it's going to snap. I can select this layer. Same thing, I can rotate. I can select both layers like I just did and rotate. Undo that. Here's my camera tool, which we're not going to get into the camera tool, but that essentially works with 3D layers, which we'll talk about in another video. I've also got the pan behind tool or the anchor point tool, right? So if I selected this layer and I need to move the anchor point, let's say down here, I can do that with the anchor point tool, or I can move it up here. And you might say, well, why do you need to do that? Well, if I undo this, and let's say I was to hit W and rotate this, right? It rotates from the center, right? So let me undo that. I'll hit Y on the keyboard to go back to my anchor point. And let's just say I move it up in here. I'll hit W to go back to rotate. Now you can see it's rotating from this point, right? So this is the advantage of moving your anchor point around. And that's the Y keyboard shortcut for the pan behind tool or anchor point tool. I'm not really sure why it's called the pan behind tool, but it always has been. Next, we have the rectangle tool. This can be used to create things like masks. So if I draw a box around this part of the image, I'm only seeing this part. If I drag it in here, I can only see this part. I hit V on my keyboard, so I'm on my selection tool again. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag so we can see more of this. Maybe move this guy over here. And there's our mask. So with the selection tool, again, once a mask is drawn, we can click on the different parts of the mask and we can move these parts around. We can move entire edges like this. I'm holding down Shift to keep it locked. We can select points like this. But this is how you use a mask tool with the selection tool. Let me undo some of this stuff here. I'll go down to my timeline and there's my mask. I'm just going to highlight it, hit delete on the keyboard, and it's gone. I can also create things if nothing's selected. I could double click on this rectangle tool and I could make a shape layer, right? And we're going to talk about shape layers here in a little bit as well, but there's our shape layer. I also have different things like we talked about the rectangle tool. I've got the rounded rectangle tool ellipse tool, a polygon tool, and a star tool. So for the ellipse tool, if I select that, I select not my Photoshop layer, but my video layer, and I click and drag, you can see it's creating a ellipse mask now instead of a square mask, right? So just some advantages to the different shapes. I could also hold down Shift as I'm creating this, and it's going to keep it as a perfect circle. So I'm holding down Shift and I'm dragging out, and it's making a perfect circle. Holding down Shift also works with the rectangle tool. So I could hold it down, it's going to make a perfect square. If I let go, it's just going to make a rectangle depending on what, I need to mask out. Okay, so next we've got the pen tool. And the pen tool's got several features within it. And essentially what the pen tool does is it is an ability to draw a path that we can close the path and we make a mask like we see here. We can also not close the mask. So I undid that point. I'll hit V for my selection tool. Actually, I'll undo all of this here. So that's one way. How else can we use the pen tool? Well, we'll get into keyframes in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe here. And don't worry if you're not following along with what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to set a second keyframe, and I'm going to move this footage over here, and I'm going to move the footage over here. So now it just follows this path, right? And it's just a linear path. Actually, we'll set one more keyframe up here. So now we've got this kind of strange, let me actually adjust this because there's a glitch there. We've got kind of this strange motion path, right? Not very exciting, kind of bumps up and then bumps down. Well, we can take this motion path now, and we can actually use the pen tool, and I can click, and I've created handles on this motion path. Now, selecting the V tool and bringing this out, I can actually kind of make this a more interesting path, right? So now it's going to kind of go in an arc like so, and it's very smooth, right? So the pen tool helps to smooth out motion paths as well. Again, like I said, we will get more into the pen tool when we get into masking and shape layers. Next, we've got the text tool. The text tool has a horizontal type tool and a vertical type tool. So first we will go horizontal, we'll type in Earth. There we go, some massive type there. That is horizontal text. Okay, and now if I want to move this Earth text, I have to be careful and hit the selection tool. I don't want to hit V because V, if I was to just type this text on here and then hit V for my selection tool, it's going to type a V here on the text, right? We don't want that. So if you've just typed some text, you just want to go over here to the tool panel, click the selection tool, and now we can move this around. Text can move just like any other layer can move. I can hit the rotate W key and I can rotate it just like so. I can undo that. I can scale by selecting a corner and scaling. I can hold down Shift and scale it proportionally like so. So text is treated the same way as photos or graphics or footage. Everything can rotate, move, scale, transparency, all that great stuff. Next, we've got the vertical type tool. That's just what it sounds like. If I type in Earth again, it's just typing it out vertically, which I will shrink this down. You can see it like so. There we go. Again, I can hit the W key and I can rotate it and do all types of fun stuff with it. Next, we have the brush tool. The brush tool I do not use very often in After Effects. If I'm going to paint or anything like that, I often go to Photoshop. If you do decide to paint inside of After Effects, the trick is that you can't come over here and paint. You see here it says use the paint, roto brush, and refine edge tools in a layer panel. With these tools, double click a layer to open it in a layer panel. So pretty easy. It tells you what to do. What that means is if I double click it here, I go into a layer panel. You can see this is a different composition panel. Here's my original composition. Here's my layer panel. I can close this. I can also double click down here and it's going to open it up, or I can double click up here and it opens it up as well. So once inside this layer panel, this is where I can use my brushes. Like right now I'm on the brush tool, which is Command B. And when I activate that, you'll see that over here, I've got more panels that open up, and one of them is brushes. So for brushes, it's just like Photoshop. I can pick a larger brush. I can change the color of it, and I can actually start painting and doing things like that. I can also undo that. I can use the clone stamp tool, and it works the same way as Photoshop. I hold down Option or Alt, and I can select a point, and I can go up here and start cloning parts of my image up in here. The difference is that down here now in my timeline under effects, you're going to see a paintbrush. You're going to see a clone brush, and it creates like this long keyframe in your timeline. So now you can see the motion of it here. If I create another clone, it's going to create a second path within that same clone. If I click outside of it and start cloning, it creates a second clone altogether. So that's the clone brush. And again, you have to be in this layer panel to do that. Some advantages to layer panel are you can toggle the alpha channels off and on. You can see boundaries, overlay modes. You can set in and out points. If I decide that I need to set a specific endpoint of my footage, and I don't want to kind of drag handles around down here, I can do that up here. I can find my endpoint, and I can go right here and click set endpoint. You're going to see in the timeline, it updates, right? It made the endpoint right here. It's still at 0, but it took all this beginning footage off, which is kind of cool. And then I can go to an out point, and I could say, this is my out point. There we go. And it ends here. So a different way to work with layers as within the layer panel. I've also got my eraser tool. So with the eraser tool, I can do exactly what it says. I can erase parts of an image like that. It's going to create an effect. It's an eraser, and there it is. Next, we've got the roto brush, which we're not going to get into the roto brush, but if you're into roto work, this is what you would use for easy masking. And finally, up here, we've got something called the puppet pen tool. And this gets very complex as well, but just to show you like a quick example, I can place a puppet pen here, and let's say I place one here, and I place one here. So what it does is it sets a keyframe. So if I hit U on my keyboard to show keyframes, there they are. If I move further down my timeline to somewhere in here, and I have these puppet keys selected, I can move things. I can bend things. This is great for working with characters, or like, let's say this was a flag and it's it needs to wave in the wind. I'm just sitting here animating the puppet pen, right? So now if I hit 0 to preview this, you can see it's bending this layer and kind of doing its thing. So a lot of possibilities with the puppet pen as well. Okay, that does it for the tool panel icons.